This is the 007 Debriefings. I am Intelligence Officer Wiz.
And I'm Weapons Specialist Zero.
Zero, how you doing this week?
Doing all right. Good.
So we are here to comb the files of MI6 to go over the cinematic exploits of James Bond. This week, Lazenby's solo effort on Her Majesty's Secret Service. We're going to get to the mission objectives, and the first one we're going to go to is 007, who is James Bond, played by George Lazenby. Zero, I gotta say, in a lot of ways, Lazenby gets a very poor rap when it comes to his one stint as James Bond. And I think it's mainly because he only did one James Bond movie. If he would have done more, I think people would have liked Lazenby a lot more. So I don't think he's bad. I think he has a lot of good qualities, and stuff that I think he's a little bit better than with Connery then. But there are other points where I think he could have needed a lot of work that could have been helped if he would have done another movie or two. Let me start with what I first thought when I saw Lazenby on screen. And the first thing I thought was, nice guy Bond. Just personable Bond. It has a very nice look to him. Somebody that you would see and you can just smile and be like, oh, he seems like a nice guy. That's kind of where I was feeling towards with him when the movie started, which has its good and it has its bad. The good is that this Bond is a much more personable, less threatening Bond on the surface. Very congenial. I think he's more suave, more gentlemanly-like. So when women get involved with him, it's not a matter of, ooh, this guy's like a machismo machine, and it's more like he seems very comforting, very nice, a person that I'm comfortable to be around. That different type of interpretation of Bond.
So, as far as Lazenby's portrayal, it's definitely, I will agree that he's more sort of a nice and charming sort of Bond, but he's also less of a chauvinist compared to Connery in the last two movies. He would be the Bond that you would expect him to drop, like, maybe a flower or two on a pretty lady instead of just going and slapping him on the butt at the side of a pool or something.
Yeah. He did slap a girl in one part of that movie, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
But, well, he might have had a good reason. Like I said, I think this portrayal is much more gentlemanly, a romantic guy, a romantic Bond, I guess would be the best way to put it. I wish I would have come up with that earlier. The other key difference I want to talk about is that Lazenby is much more youthful looking than Connery. Connery is much more rugged and world-weary, even though he's still very much handsome and very photogenic for the ladies. Lazenby is much more photogenic. I think he has a much more well-defined face. He is much more of a traditionally handsome guy, whereas I wouldn't say that quite about Connery. In this, Connery delved into the ruggedness of his character and of himself to portray Bond, whereas Lazenby, I think, is just pure charm and just pure sophistication. I do have one issue with the youthfulness, though, when it comes to Lazenby, is that with Connery, I do believe when you look at him, oh yeah, this guy's traveled the world. He's somebody who can assess the situation as best as he can. He just looks that part really well. Whereas Lazenby kind of makes me feel like he's Doogie Bond, where he's just this super genius of a person who can just out of a whim just be able to do it, even though there really is not a believable way for me to actually believe that he is capable of that because of how young looking he is. Now, I want to say that when Connery did it, he did it 3 years older than Lazenby. Lazenby was 29, and Connery was 32. But the look that he has is just, I guess, very baby-faced, but like very traditionally handsome and youthful looking.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, because I know when I was watching this, and it's been quite a while, but I remember looking at it, I was like, wow, it's almost like Lazenby sort of de-aged Bond for a bit with just how youthful his face looks compared to Connery and everything. It was one thing that I had forgotten with not having watched the movie in quite a while, but I remember just being sort of hit with that on first glance of Lazenby. I was just like, oh shit, looks like Lazenby de-aged the Bond role for a couple years.
Yeah. So let me get to what I thought was good and bad about Lazenby here. Good, I think the charm and smoothness of his character. I think that's easily his most believable and best features in this film. You can see why it is so easy for women to want his attention, not only because of his looks, but also how he is so playful and how he is very congenial to people. He's not as threatening, he's just very likable. And then when the romance happens between Tracy and him, that's also believable. Whereas I couldn't see a woman really falling for Connery's Bond the way that Tracy does with Lazenby's Bond.
Lazenby's Bond is sort of like a nice, charming Bond, one that's sort of ready to kind of settle down and stuff like that. Connery's Bond seems like the wild bucking horse that some of these women in the Connery movies are like, hey, I can tame him, I can change him, I can do it.
Yeah. More like Connery is the fuck boy and the Lazenby Bond is the one that you bring home to your mom, essentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically.
I get what you're saying. So that's the good. Here's the bad. The action scenes. He is just so messy in these. From like the hand-to-hand combat to the skiing and everything in between, he just doesn't seem comfortable doing these scenes. The opening scene on the beach is a big example of that. Because the way that he does the hand-to-hand combat is like he flails. He puts his whole like hip and swings his arm wildly to do an uppercut. And it just doesn't look believable at all. And it just seems like that the people who are doing the stunts are overcompensating for that because they like gesticulate wildly to give him the emphasis of power in that punch. Honestly, it just really is distracting to a certain extent to see how he is in these scenes. And then when you get to the skiing scenes is where it gets really odd.
And I think you would put it best, but I know when I was rewatching the movie for this review and everything, I was just like, wow, just the choreography looks worse than the last movie. And this is a completely different actor. What the hell is going on? And it was one of those things that I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think you really summed it up best. It seemed like the other people in the action scenes, be it the henchmen or whatever, they seemed like they were definitely overcompensating to go, all right, he's having trouble finding his footing. We gotta do our job and make it look like he's doing his role pretty good or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like professional wrestling. You have to sell the move in order for it to be believable. I think they just sold it too well, and Lazenby just doesn't have the right footing or anything to make it that believable, unfortunately. I like him as Bond. I don't think he's anywhere as good as Connery, but it's different. But it's something that if he would have just given it 2 more tries, I think he would have really had something unique. But as is, it's fine, but it's like a curiosity fine.
It was like you had mentioned in the beginning that he's fine as a portrayal of Bond, but it would have been nice to have seen him in the role for just a little bit longer for people to sort of get acquainted with him. I thought his portrayal was okay, and maybe if he was in a few more Bond movies, maybe he could have gotten a little bit more comfortable with the action stuff. As far as like personality-wise, he's probably one of the better portrayals of Bond, but on the action end, he is not great.
Yeah. One other thing, and we'll move on. He's terrible with the quips.
Oh yes, no. There's no clever delivery of the quips.
No, he's just bad at that. So, villain, which is once again Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who is played by Telly Savalas. I gotta tell you, this is no offense to Donald Pleasance from the last movie, but what an improvement on that portrayal. I really like Blofeld in this version. He is much more believable as as a leader of an organization, and then he's that perfect amount of charismatic and deliciously evil, where it's more of the brilliant businessman in a sort of way, and it's really easy to see why he ensnares people in his web of deceit and crime. And on top of that, he's physically imposing too, so you can believe that he will get down and dirty if he has to, but he's also smart enough that you really need to outsmart him.
This is a villain I can kind of get behind. He's less sort of cartoonish, kind of like the portrayal of Blofeld in the last movie, And he doesn't have like a cartoonish way of speaking either, so
Yes.
he seems like he's very eloquent on how he talks. And for that, it was a huge improvement because, yeah, I definitely think that the previous depiction of Blofeld was where Austin Powers got the idea of, hey, this is how we have to make Dr. Evil. And I'm just I was just like, oh god, Dr. Evil's ruined this role.
I know. Again, like, Savalas does a great job with Blofeld in this one. Like, this is the one, I know Pleasance is probably the one that gets the most people talking about, like, oh, that's Blofeld. Savalas is really good in this. I really like what he did with Blofeld in this movie, and I think it really works not only for this movie, but if they're smart, I don't know how many other times Blofeld is in these movies, but this should be the template where they should go for at this point. I know he's in SPECTRE, and we'll get to that when that comes. I think this portrayal of Blofeld is great. So let's move on to the Bond girl, which is Countess Tracy DiVincenzo, played by Diana Rigg. I like Tracy in this movie. I especially like Diana Rigg. I like how there are some complexities and enough character to really get to know the girl. But the problem is, there's no time with her. There's a good amount of time, but the time that you would want to get to know her a lot more is truncated. At first, she comes off as like very combative, fierce, as someone that you should not mess with. And then she's putty in like 15 minutes. Like, what the hell happened?
I quite liked the character of Tracy. She seemed like a Bond girl with a little bit of a backbone, but when the romance plot gets kind of thrown in, when her father's just like, hey, if you want the info that I have, you gotta marry my daughter. And it's just like one of those sort of movie cliches where just the girl just is like, nope, not interested, fuck that. And then all of a sudden it's just like, all right, we're madly and wildly in love with each other. It was just like, wow, just not much development on the romance there. It's just kind of, all right, so start off combative and bam, just dating and love interest, go.
Bond's penis is so magical. The thought of it inserting her has made her fall in love with him. How incredible is this? My God, I wish I had that. I could put it in if you want to. Oh, I love you so much, Wiz. Oh, like, oh God, I wish I had that. But anyway, and I think one huge problem with this character, she's not in the movie for an entire act of the film. When they go into the Alps, into that retreat, there's an hour of the film where she is not in the movie. Literally an hour. I actually made sure to watch the movie again to just get the time of when Bond is in that retreat into when he leaves and Tracy is introduced again. It's about an hour. It's so much time where you do not see this character. And then when you see her next, it's not like it's a it's like a reunion. Oh, honey, I'm so glad. It's like, oh, fancy you being here. I'm like, what? It's like, where did this come from?
It's a little bit of a problem. I don't think it's like a major problem, but the part where he's over at the ski resort, there's a plot issue with that we'll have to get into later. But it is a bit weird for the character of Tracy just to disappear for one whole hour. It was just like, okay, typically you've got like the Bond girl sort of on prominent display, and after the introduction and the dating phase of their relationship, just he sort of disappears out of her life, and that's that. Okay, sure, I guess.
Yeah. When they finally meet again, is she angry? Is she upset she hasn't seen her fiancé in a while? No. In fact, it's just like, oh, honey, okay, let me help save you from the bad guys. I'm like, that part's kind of cool, but then you don't think, like, for someone who's madly in love with somebody who hasn't seen them for a period of time, that you would then go, where the fuck have you been? Like, where have you been? Like, I've missed you. What's going on? Like, oh, I have no time now, darling. SPECTRE's after me. She's enjoyable as a fully capable Bond girl who can actually help Bond, which I think is interesting. She actually helps Bond get saved, which I thought was pretty cool in this one. But let's get to the big difference between most of the other Bond girls and this girl. Zero, what is it? What is the big difference between her and everyone else? Bond marries her.
Oh, right.
Bond marries her. It's like, whoa, hold on. I don't think Bond marries Léa Seydoux' character in SPECTRE, correct? They're just in a long-term relationship?
Bond was supposed to settle down, but there was like a trust issue that came up between Bond and the psychiatrist for the Daniel Craig stuff. That's why they never got married, because all the psychological stuff just really messed up Bond. That she was just like, nope. If you can't settle your mental shit, marriage is a definite no.
Yeah, and let me say this, okay? It would be pretty cool to have a Bond that does get married and finds that one woman who says, I'm going to stop my philandering ways, and instead of laying a bunch of women all across the world, I'm just going to stick with you. And that could be interesting. But is it believable in this movie? Fuck no, it's not believable. Like, not in the slightest is it believable. I just wouldn't believe that Bond, after he goes through all this, would actually marry her and go through with it. I just don't see that in this. It's not bad. Like Rig and Lazenby play off of each other very well, but just the marrying part's just not believable in the slightest for me.
I think the marrying part is sort of more tied to the plot, because Draco's condition is basically just, hey, you need to date and marry my daughter, and I'll give you the info and 1 million British pounds sterling as sort of a dowry for her and everything. That's why you've got like the crazy extravagant wedding and that sort of stuff. And for me, it just felt like it was sort of tacked on. I was just like, okay, I get that, Bond's trying to be an honorable gentleman and just hold up his side of the bargain, but with the whole romance being sort of a whirlwind, and then Bond disappearing for a little bit of time to, just scope out this one facility, and then to suddenly bump into his fiancée, soon-to-be wife, and then basically going, hey, dear God, you gotta help me get the hell out of here, with no fight, no anger, no, where the hell have you been? And it's just kind of a, okay, let me get you out of here. And it just seems sort of tacked on. But like I said, I kind of get it on where the marriage is coming from, but yeah, it still doesn't help that it just sort of feels tacked in, and their relationship really didn't have that much of a struggle.
Now, I like Rig in this role. I actually like her as Tracy in this. She's believable as the person who would try and kill Bond, but she's also strangely believable as the woman who utterly falls for him as well. Like, I believe both sides of the character. I just could not believe that Bond himself would actually stick the landing on this one. Like, I think the only thing that I find bad about Rig's performance is that she's just not in the movie enough.
It's a total shame, because I think she's probably one of the more lovely Bond girls thus far.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think she's very good. I think she's up there with me with Tanya and Pussy Galore. I think she's really good. All right, Zero, spy action. So we've already alluded to a lot of this in the 007 section, so we're just going to go by stuff really quick. When it comes to Bond, when it comes to Lazenby, he's just awkward. He just doesn't look right in this. The skiing sections as well, they're fine editing-wise, and they go through the whole projection green screen thing again, which, okay, and they edit it fine, but he just does not look comfortable. He does not look right in this. Like, on the one hand, I think the action's fine. You really have to put in your head that Lazenby just doesn't feel right in the action part.
With the mention of the green screen shenanigans, there are some moments where the green screen shenanigans commit the sin of just not really sizing the objects respectively again, and it looks bad.
Yeah.
Because I think that there was one scene where, like, Blofeld's trying to chase after Bond, and one of the henchmen is supposedly right behind Blofeld, but the henchman is blown up to, like, almost 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, god damn it. The fucking green screen shenanigans strike again.
Even the last scene with the luge scene, there were stuntmen involved in that. That also looked kind of awkward in certain circumstances, but I'm not going to say the action is bad, but it definitely did feel like Lazenby was not comfortable.
We're getting to the spy shenanigans sort of thing. There's one part that just kind of made me just sort of scratch my head, because Bond as a character has usually been known to be kind of a stickler on the details. The ski resort that Blofeld runs, there was one issue that I took with that, and that was when he's supposed to be playing a London College of Arms genealogist, and the genealogist, I think, during the details gathering phase, kind of alluded to himself being a gay man, and then just Bond gets to the resort, he's just kind of like implying, sure, I might be gay, but you know, maybe I can be turned around. I'm just like, God damn it, that's not how Bond operates.
Stay in character, Bond. Get that man.
The whole gay part is sort of further alluded to when he gets captured by Blofeld, and Blofeld's just like where he screwed up is the fact that Sir Hilary Bray isn't interested in women, and it was just like, that seems like an amateur grade mistake instead of a mistake that Bond would go, oh shit, really? Whoops.
Okay, so we're in the spy sections. I think the spy sections are pretty good. But the main sequence is the Alps sequence in the retreat with all the young girls that are there fawning over Bond and everything. That was an hour long. It was way too long. Why was it that long? They could have cut that back to like another 20 minutes and this could have been an easy 2-hour film. But they spent way too much time. Like, way too much time. Like, did you really need the conversation between him and Blofeld when he was undercover?
That whole sequence just seemed like it was just sort of trying way too hard to do some world building when there could have been some more condensed but impactful ways to do world building. It's just like you said, it just felt like it just went on for forever and ever and ever. And I mean, sure, if someone's kind of more interested on sort of like the literary end of the Bond stories, then yeah, it might have been fine. But even for me, who read a lot of the James Bond books as a kid, even for me, it felt like it went on for too long.
With that, I have one question, okay? In regards to Blofeld figuring out who James Bond was, wouldn't you think that since Blofeld has encountered him several times now, including once face-to-face, you wouldn't think that he would probably recognize him, right? I mean, the disguise wasn't that good. He just wore a coat and had a pipe. Like, it wasn't that recognizable. Am I wrong?
I can definitely see what you mean, especially because it almost seems like just the fact that Bond just sort of takes on a pair of glasses, a pipe, almost kind of like a detective's coat on him, just somehow that magically changes like who he is. It's almost kind of like the comic book gag of just, and nobody recognizes Superman when he's Clark Kent.
Overall, I think the action's okay. I think the spy stuff is pretty good, but this is definitely one of the weaker elements of the film, which is kind of surprising because the character stuff is actually pretty good, but then the action is the weakest part, which is actually the exact opposite of You Only Live Twice, where I thought the action was the best part, but the rest of it just wasn't good.
The action, it's a bit weak. I will give them credit that they didn't load up Bond with like a ton of gadgets, or if any gadgets at all, other than the car. But at the same time, just with some of the spy stuff being a bit weird, like the whole just missing the detail about Sir Hilary Bray and just Bond just making what seems like a very amateur mistake. It just seems like it just wasn't well thought out in some respects. And then you've got, as usual, some of the weird green screen stuff going on. Just, I think overall, just, it's a bit weaker on the action and spy stuff.
Okay, so theme song and opening credits. The theme song is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, music by John Barry. It's okay. I will say this, though. Adding synthesizer to the traditional James Bond theme, bad move. Terrible move. It sounded terrible.
Yeah.
For the credits theme, not bad. And then for the opening credit sequence, it's fine, I guess. It's still a step down from Russia with Love and Goldfinger. What I don't understand is why did they put scenes from the older movies into this to remind you that, hey, Connery isn't here. I'll say this. I can understand on one hand to tell the audience, hey, it's going to be just like those that you remember. But on the other hand, I was like, okay, there's Pussy Galore, there's Honey Rider. Those are the Connery movies, but Connery's not in this. Why are we reminding ourselves of this?
Yeah, it seemed a bit strange to just throw in synthesizer to the classic Bond theme. The opening sequence, just having these weird cuts of the previous Bond movies was a bit strange, and I had forgotten about that too, because when I was watching, I was like, oh shit, really? You got scenes of the past Bond movies, and this is the first movie that Connery isn't starring in? That is such a weird stylistic choice. Why would you do that? It's almost kind of like a dog shitting on the floor and then you just smashing the dog's nose into the floor and going, "You smell that shit? That shit was yours!" It just seemed like the strangest decision on the planet.
No, I agree. I mean, I guess the only way to do it is just to remind the audience that, hey, you like the stuff, you remember this, right? And then it just kind of lulls you into a comfort zone. But yeah, I kind of agree. I don't think it's a great idea. All right, Zero, is it mission accomplished for on your Her Majesty's Secret Service?
I'd have to say, while I like Lazenby, this is going to have to be a failure for me.
Ooh. Wow.
It's not by like a large margin, it is by a very, very short margin, and I think that margin is really the action and the spy stuff. It's very, very weak. If you're the sort of literary person that likes world building, then this might be a great watch for you, but most Bond fans, I imagine, are into the Bond movies because of all the action and high-stakes spy stuff.
I would agree with you on that one. So we're going to have the opposite of what we had with You Only Live Twice, because you said mission accomplished for that, and I said mission failure for that. I'm going to put mission accomplished for this movie. And I agree with your points. I think the action and the spy stuff is a weak part of this movie, which is kind of odd to think about in this. But I do like Lazenby as Bond. I think he's underrated to a certain extent. I think the more sophisticated, suave, gentlemanly like slant that he has, I think is something different that could have worked if it went multiple times. Connery is much more believable when it comes to the action, the intimidation, the ruthlessness of the character. And again, Connery is better with the action as well. And like I mentioned too, Lazenby's just too young looking to be Bond. He just looks way too young. But that said, I like Lazenby as Bond. I really like Diana Rigg as the Bond girl Tracy, and I really liked Savalas as Blofeld in this movie. So with that, I will recommend and say mission accomplished for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But I will say that I do agree with your points on that. I think that for action-wise, and if you are looking for the action, this is probably not the Bond film for you. Mission failed for Zero, mission accomplished for me. It's like a fun curiosity. Would you say that at least?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I mentioned that anyone who's like really into the literary concept of just world building, you're probably going to have fun with the movie because of the fact that you've got so much world building about Blofeld's plot within the 1 hour section that they focus on the ski resort and everything, because there is a lot of world building. But again, just in my opinion, I felt like it could be condensed down a little better, and it just wasn't. It was just like, hey, we'll have Bond playing Sir Hilary Bray sort of going into a long lecture on just genealogy and everything, and it's just like, this could have been shortened down or something.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
You've got this long scene where, you know, just he's kind of hanging out with the girls and just trying to get to know them and everything, and that sort of dragged on forever too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. That could have been cut down a bit, but I don't think it would have helped with your problems, though, correct? I mean, it might have been a little bit better, but I think the specific problems you have, I don't think would have helped. Correct?
Yeah, my issue is just the action choreography just wasn't great. If the fight choreography was tightened up a little bit more, and some of the action choreography, especially with the green screen stuff, because some of the past movies, they did the green screen stuff perfectly fine. It wasn't great, but I mean, it was fine. But yeah, when you have like a mistake where one of the guys behind Blofeld's green screen on the ski scene was made to look like he was 7 feet tall, it's just kind of like, guys, you're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
All right, so mission failure for you, mission accomplished for me. A split vote, but I mean, if you're doing what we're doing, you're probably going to watch it anyway. I will say this with you, you're okay to skip this. Yeah? Do you think?
It's a bit of a weaker movie, so I mean, if you're not in the mood for a weak Bond movie, then yeah, I mean, you could probably skip it.
Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.